Hey, falling star.
Oh, I missed it.
Well, I'll tell you what. I already have everything I want, so I'll give you my wish.
But don't you have to see the star to get your wish?
When I got the call to audition for Little House, I was about 9 years old, and I'd been working professionally as an actor since I was 2.
From age 9 to age 11, I did commercials, I did some small parts, and then I was called for this great big audition for this period Western.
My mother said your pa took you to Mankato to get glasses, but I never thought you'd have the nerve to wear them. What do you mean, Nellie? Oh, nothing.
There was an audition, and I remember reading this and going, this is so not me. It wasn't like any kid part I read where everybody's like very nice in TV shows. She was just vile.
I would never wear the ugly things. Mary's going to be an old spinster, just like Miss Beadle, because no one ever marries a Four Eyes.
I liked the idea that I could get this role where I could just vent my hostilities and do terrible, terrible things that I would never do in real life.
When producer Michael Landon and his collaborators set out to bring Little House on the Prairie to television, they knew their most important decision would be casting the performers who would bring the characters of Walnut Grove to life.
I was very lucky to find really incredible children that were very special, very real. They weren't actor children. They were real children.
You're two-faced, Mary Ingalls. Saying one thing behind Johnny's back and acting another to his face. It wasn't my idea to play teacher, it was his.
The audition process was pretty long. There was a huge pool of talent in the room when I first went in. And I went after school in my audition clothes, which was overalls and a shirt and whatever dirt was on my face that day, and my hair in braids.
Jack is my best and truest friend. And Pa said there had never been a better watchdog. I knew there would be rivers to cross and hills to climb. And I was glad, for this is a fair land, and I rejoiced that I would see it.
I wasn't particularly excited. My mother was very nervous and excited, more than usual. I was just kind of, I don't know, very nonchalant about the whole thing.
There was a big meeting at NBC with these NBC officials. Then they narrowed it down, and we read for Mike Landon at Paramount, which was incredibly exciting.
Well, Lance, prices are going up.
Well, of course, Mr. Ingalls, it is the Christmas season. I was getting ready to go back to New York, and my agent called and said, could you go see somebody this afternoon? And I said, well, who did you say I'm supposed to meet? She said, Michael Landon. And I said, well, so who's he?
Meeting Michael Landon, I met him at the audition, and I hadn't really watched Bonanza. I'd seen it, but I was too young to be, like, in love with Little Joe, which my Auntie Marian clearly was. She was mad for him, as were most of the women, and he was gorgeous.
I had no idea who he was. I watched Batman. I didn't watch Bonanza, so I had no idea what I was in for.
Well, at least my daughter's showing a little good common sense, huh?
Your daughter. My father, Billy Greenbush, had already worked twice with Michael on Bonanza. He filmed 2 separate episodes, so Michael knew who my father was.
Where did you come from? Anywhere I want. Who are you? Your fairy god sister. Really? Yes.
So when my sister and I just happened to be the twin girls the right age that he was looking for, he had us come in and interview.
Harry, you're not supposed to be up here. How'd she climb the ladder?
What are you climbing around the house for? You know you're not supposed to do that.
What I knew about Mike Landon at the time I met him was that he had been on Bonanza. I think I was his last appointment of the day. So we ended up walking out with him. And I said, just to make conversation, I said, I've watched some of your episodes. And he said, oh, really? Which ones? And I said, well, I just saw the one where you went blind. And then you got your sight back. It was so telling because years later, I was the one who went blind and unfortunately never got my sight back.
Stay away from her. Don't touch my horse. Not hurting anything.
I said stay away from her.
I went to this audition. They said, we're making a show out of these books called Little House on the Prairie.
I hate you. I hope so.
We're sitting there on the steps going through the sides, and I turned to my father and I said, this is not normal. And he said, what? I said, this girl is a total bitch.
Laura smells like a dirty horse. You better watch out in those nice clean clothes. I got a lot of work to do.
What's so important about cleaning up after dirty old horses, especially this one?
My father said, what are you talking about? And I read it for him, and he starts cracking up. And he says, don't change a thing. Do not touch it. Do not even read it again. You're going to read it like that.
I'm glad my father gave her back to you. She smells bad.
Don't we all?
I went in, and it was Michael Landon and Ken McCrae and the other producers, and I read it, and they were laughing hysterically, and they said, could you do that again, please? And I said, oh, yes, what would you like me to change? And they said, nothing, just read the thing about the house again. And it was the my home speech from that episode, Country Girls, where I talk about how much everything costs.
All of our furniture is bought in two, and it cost a whole lot. If I told you how much, you'd probably faint dead away. But my pa, Olson's Mercantile, says that talking about how much things cost isn't proper.
By the time we got home, my agent was on the phone saying, your wardrobe fitting is Tuesday.
You know, there was a time not too long ago that I wanted to die. But now I want to live more than I ever did before.
When I first auditioned for Little House, I flew down from Stockton, went to MGM Studios, and sat down in an office with Susan Sukman, who was the casting director of Little House.
Almanzo Wilder was the gentleman that Laura Ingalls was to fall in love with.
Your pa said I should ask you if you want to come with me to the church social this Friday night.
He did?
I mean, I asked his permission to ask you.
You did?
And there was Dean Butler. And he came in, and he was just charming.
And then a couple of weeks later, I got a call to come back down and meet with Michael Landon. You sort of have a sense that you're very close at that point. So I start reading for him. And the scene that I'm reading for him is the scene at the end of Back to School Part 2. It was a scene where Laura and Almanzo are sitting at Almanzo's house after Almanzo pulls Laura out of the mud fight.
Well, it's not the end of the world. You can take the test again. My sister had to take her teaching exam 3 times. 3 times.
As I'm reading, I'm watching Michael out of the corner of my eye, and he's got his hand up in front of his eyes, framing me. At the end of it, he said, what are you doing at the end of May? And I said, I'm graduating from college. He said, I think we can wait that long.
The audition for me was a complete surprise. I'd never heard of Little House on the Prairie. I walk into this office and there's about 6 ladies sitting around in Old West clothes. I thought, well, I better read the darn book. And in the first chapter, Mary goes blind and the dog dies. I thought, what kind of series am I getting myself into?
Settle down, children, settle down.
The scene I was reading was the first day that Laura and Mary come to school. So I asked the producer if I could sit behind his desk, because it just made sense to me. If they want to get an idea of what I'm going to be like as a teacher, I need to have a little authority.
You must be the new girls from Plum Creek, aren't you?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Miss Beadle.
And they kind of looked, it was all men, they kind of looked at each other, and he said, well, okay. He got up, and I sat behind his desk, and I played Miss Beadle, you know, to Laura and Mary, and then got up and said thank you and walked out. And then my agent called and said they wanted to sign me for 4 years, and I said, what?
Mrs. Olson, I'm being paid to teach.
Oh, well, then you can't very well do that, can you? If there's a riot going on in here.
And how would you go about disciplining a boy who outweighs you by 50 pounds and is a head taller than you are?
That is not my problem.
This is just me and Michael and Maury Dexter, and we were in a tiny room, and they laughed out loud at one point, and I stopped.
Oh, disgusting. Oh, of course, it's that Ingalls boy. Oh, he's always pretending to be such a goody-good. Well, they're the worst ones. Gotta watch them.
And I turned and looked at them like, what the hell's the matter with you? Why are you laughing? It wasn't the scene. The scene wasn't funny.
Oh, Margaret, please, don't be so naive. And for heaven's sakes, it's a way of life with these farm families. Well, of course, I didn't mean... Well, no, Margaret. No, Margaret. Well, I didn't mean... I know your husband's a farmer. Well, you could just go there, too.
She called me that night, my agent, and she said, well, they want a 7-year contract. I said, they want a what?
When it was time to cast Little House, there was a role
10 foot if it's an inch.
of Mr. Edwards.
Can I do it too?
Well, now, that ain't easy unless you got a plug of jaw in the back.
Victor French was respected from his theater work to his film work to television work.
The thing I don't understand is how your ma gets anything done.
Victor French was tremendous in that role.
I was married once. Had me a daughter, Alice. A couple of years younger than Laura. They look alike, you know. There's something about Laura. Guess that's why I take to her so.
In a cast filled with sensitive men and strong women, no actor fit the Little House universe more perfectly than Merlin Olsen.
I remember meeting Merlin Olsen the first time in the reading. He was such a presence. I mean, he was such a huge teddy bear. He was so simple and so real and so honest and so kind and so bright.
I ain't taking charity from my wife.
Oh, you fool. It's not charity.
Don't call me that. I worked as hard as I can, and maybe I failed, but I ain't gonna be called names for that, and I ain't gonna be looked down on anymore. I'm through, Alice. Through.
In addition to writing and directing scores of episodes, Michael Landon was, of course, also a cast member, contributing a string of unforgettable performances to Little House on the Prairie.
I had come out from New York to make a movie. It was going to be my first movie, and it fell through. And I was there in Los Angeles. I was broke, and I didn't know what I was going to do. So I thought, maybe I've been in show business and it's not right for me. Maybe I have to go back to school. I got a call from my agent saying, they're looking for somebody for the wife on this new series, and it's Michael Landon directing. I go in, Mike reads with me.
Charles, we have enough to eat. We have a roof over our heads. There's...
Carolyn, don't make this harder on me than it is already.
Why does it always have to be hard on you? Did you ever stop to think it's hard on me?
I'm telling you, this guy jumps up off the floor and says, send her to wardrobe. Before I got home from the studio, my agent had already called. You got the part. I mean, it was so exciting. My reaction was, oh, I get to stay in show business. And I got to be an actress, and I knew. I knew that if I got to do television, that people would know something about my work, and that I would work again. It was huge for me.
Laura, where are you?
We had a screen test for a bunch of Lauras and a bunch of Marys.
Melissa Sue Anderson actually came in originally as Laura Ingalls. But when Michael looked at her, he felt she was more of the Mary Ingalls because she was a little bit more sophisticated.
Pa said yesterday we're supposed to help Ma. I'm helping.
I got a call on a Friday evening, I believe, from my agent, and my agent said, can you lose 5 pounds? And I said, why? And she said, because someone said you look too well-fed looking for a pioneer. But they really want you to be Mary. And I was jumping up and down. I was so excited. And of course I can lose 5 pounds. Who can't lose 5 pounds? Of course I can lose 5 pounds.
I have very vague memories of the screen test.
Action.
I do remember the scene under the stars after the dog has drowned and the dog comes back.
I'm sorry, Pop.
Sorry about what, Halfway?
Sorry for thinking you didn't care about Jack being drowned.
I remember that scene with Michael being very easy to do. One night at the dinner table, my dad talked in depth about the Little House series and doing a pilot. And he said that he thought he found his Laura Ingalls. And he said, I think she goes to the same school as you guys. I went to a private school in Los Angeles, and that happened to be the same school that the Landon kids went to. The next day, it was lunchtime. I asked a teacher where Melissa Gilbert was. And this girl came up to me and she said, are you Melissa? You're Melissa, aren't you Melissa? And she said, I am. And I said, hi, my name's Leslie, and my dad is Michael Landon, and he told me at dinner last night that you're gonna be Laura Ingalls. And I screamed. She just stood up and ran off. And I thought, huh, that was weird. And I called my mom, and my agents didn't even know. No one knew. I'm not really sure. I think Leslie might have gotten a little bit punished for that. That night, I'm at dinner, my dad comes home, and I got in big trouble. There was a huge explosion of screaming at my house. I think it was a different kind of screaming at my house than there was at the Landon house that night.
I just couldn't find the words to say what was in my heart, Half-Pint.
Michael Landon was so sure he'd found his Laura, he took no chances of being overruled by network executives.
From what I understand, when he took this screen test to the network, he only showed them mine and said, it's her. It's not anybody else, it's her. And don't fight me on it.
Am I gonna get sick too?
Half-Pint, I don't know.
That means more to me than I can even begin to express. For me, it validates so much of what my relationship was with him, that I knew he was the one that I wanted to work with and be with.
I just pray to God you know.
Don't worry, Pa. We'll be all right.
The remarkable performers who brought Little House on the Prairie to life live on in television history as one of the medium's greatest ensembles.
I have to say that Little House on the Prairie will always stay in my heart. Watching these children grow up to young women with families of their own has just been wonderful.
You couldn't ask for a better childhood than that, really. It was a great experience.
It's very rewarding to me now in ways that I couldn't have predicted. When people come up to me and say, you raised me, and I say, well, that's pretty great.